Okay, so today we'll be talking about the picture perfect family, American family. These days doesn't exist. Um, all right, so some qualitative pre-questions. What kind of family was portrayed in the 2008 elections? What kind of family was portrayed half a century ago? What is the new gold standard? How do social conservatives feel about the new gold standard? And what is one of the changes we can expect to be seen in the way we think about families in the future? All right, so families in the 2008 election. So one of the things that was most noticeable was that the four families are very different. So we could get started with the Obamas. It was in the article it was brought to light that he came from a mixed family, like he had a blended family from he had a stepsister, and then they also pointed out that Michelle was a very strong, she had a high-powered career, um, and then the Bidens, um, they come from like a step family as well, formed after the tragic death of his first wife. And then the McCains, that's another step family as well. And that one was formed after the senator's divorce, so it was a second marriage. And then the Palins, they come from like both of the parents were working parents. They had five children. They had a kid with them that had Down syndrome, I believe, and then one of their teenage kids was pregnant. So it gives you like a variety of different families and not just like nuclear, what would be like a nuclear family before. Um, let's see. Then the families that were portrayed in the 20th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, was the two-parent breadwinner homemaker and like a first marriage family only. There was a big sentiment against divorce. Uh, um, it was that big that I get Governor Nelson Rockefeller had to withdraw from the elections because he had been divorced and then he had recently been remarried. So that was like a no. Um, After that, like at the end of the last third of the 20th century, the breadwinner homemaker family rapidly declined because you had women in the workforce, um, uh, divorce rose, and then uh, there were more children born outside of the household, like a marriage. Um, then the traditional family unit started getting replaced by living arrangements. Okay, and then so then it leads into the gold standard. So what the gold standard was trying to do, um, they were working more into not like this typical family that everybody was used to, but they work hard to show like how emotionally close a family could be, and then that was the most important thing about a family. It didn't matter how it looked, that the emotional rewards of the family, that was where the priorities were. Um, so there was like the article mentions that there was this survey that they did, and 80% of the women in their 20s agreed that it was more important to have a husband who can communicate about his deepest feelings than to have a husband who makes a good living. So that changed the way that they looked about a marriage. It was more about like a personal satisfaction, like communication, openness. That was like the criteria that people were looking for within a family. And then moving on to social conservatives. So not everybody was on board or is on board with the way that family moves now. In the case of social conservatives, they hold family to a stricter moral standard. They disapprove of divorce, except in cases of infidelity and desertion, but they also will embrace a family that deviates from their ideals if it means that they do have that kind of like gold standard where they're supported and their emotions are taken into consideration. So they're willing to adapt as long as I guess you still have like a good, strong moral, emotional support. And then, so then it leads into the article leads into saying how in the future, because of all of these changes that have happened in the family and how the composition of the family has changed, it leads into talking briefly about embracing greater diversity. So it does point out that America's tolerance for family diversity still has its limits, and I think it draws that line right at that time in 2008 at same-sex couple marriages. Um, that they weren't so accepting of gay and lesbian unions. And it gives the example of, I think it was Senator McKay's daughter, and she had a partner at one of the election events, and they didn't, they were present there, but then they weren't um, in the pictures, or I think another event that they were supposed to be at, and that kind of just brings into light, how we still have these boundaries, or they still have these boundaries, and then that maybe in the future, you'll be seeing a same-sex couple if we keep continuing to embrace the diversity. Okay, so some qualitative post questions. In the 2008 elections, what kind of families were portrayed? A half century ago, what kind of families were portrayed? How would you define the gold standard? How has the gold standard affected social conservatives? And in the future, what kind of changes can be expected to be seen when it comes to families? Okay, so the quiz, um, some of the questions from before. So the answer to number one would be diverse. What kind of family was portrayed a century ago? That would be the breadwinner and homemaker, even though it was just in the middle. Towards the end, it started, you could see a change. What is, oh, sorry. Oh, it doesn't let me go back, sorry. Okay, so I'll continue from here. Um, and then the activity that I had in mind was just to expand a little bit more on the gold standard. So for the following activity, you could just list examples of how family practices the gold standard. So just, another example that could be like just, again, like emotional support and how, just give examples of that.